Hello everyone, welcome to another video of Rainbow Live, Angular interview questions for beginners. Angular basics. What is Angular? Angular is a TypeScript-based front-end framework by Google used for building single-page application. It provides built-in features like components, routing, form, and HTTP handling, making large applications scalable and maintainable. Second question, what is a single page application? A SPA loads a single HTML page once. After that, navigation happens without refreshing the entire page. Only specific parts gets updated using JavaScript, creating a fast, smooth user experience. Third question, who developed Angular? Angular is developed and maintained by Google with support from a large open source community. Next question, what language is Angular written in? Angular, as we know, is a framework. It is not a language. So Angular is written mainly in TypeScript, which is actually the superset of JavaScript. Let's move on to the fifth question. What is TypeScript? TypeScript adds types, interfaces, and modern features on top of JavaScript. Angular uses TypeScript because it helps catch errors early, improve code reliability, support OOPS concept, classes, interfaces, etc. Let's move on to the sixth question. Difference between AngularJS and Angular. As we all know, AngularJS was developed before Angular. So let's now consider what are the differences between the two frameworks. First one, AngularJS is a JavaScript-based framework, whereas Angular is a TypeScript-based framework. AngularJS will take in MVC architecture, the model view controller architecture, wherein Angular is component-based. AngularJS is relatively slower while compared to Angular, which is much faster. AngularJS does not give mobile support, but Angular is designed for mobiles as well. Let's move on to the seventh question. What is a component? Component is actually the building block of Angular. A component controls a specific UI section. It has a TypeScript file where we write the logic, the HTML file where we create the view, CSS file for adding the styles. It also contains metadata at component. With that at component directive, we will understand if it is a component or something else. Let's move on to the eighth question. What are the parts of a component? The different parts of a component are classes, which is TypeScript based. In the classes, we handle the data and logic. Next is the HTML template, which defines the UI, CSS or SCSS, which defines the styling, and component decorator, which provides metadata. Ninth question, what is a module in Angular? A module, ng module, groups related components, pipes, directives, and services. Examples of module are app module, auth module, shared module, and so on. 10th question, what is app module? The root module of an Angular application that launches the app. That is the app module. 11th question, what is a template? A template is the HTML view of the component. It defines what user sees on the screen. Well, what is metadata? Metadata tells Angular how to treat a class. Example, component for components, at ng module for modules, at injectable for services. What is data binding? Data binding connects TypeScript code with HTML template so data updates automatically. 14th, types of data binding in Angular. There are mainly 4 types of data binding. First is the interpolation that is given in 2 curly braces. Second is property binding, where we use the square bracket to bind the value of image URL to src. Next is the event binding, where we use the parenthesis. And the last one is two-way binding, which will include the parenthesis as well as the square bracket. With two-way binding, the HTML as well as the component communicates from and to. Two-way communication will happen there. Question number 15. What is one-way binding? Data flows in one direction, either TS to HTML or HTML to TS. What is two-way binding? As discussed previously, two-way binding updates both UI and component data instantly using ng model. 17. What is a directive? A directive is used to add some behavior or modify DOM elements. 18. Types of directive. There are three types of directive. First one is component. Component itself is a directive that has a template. Second one is structural directive. It alters the structure of the DOM. Example, ngIf, star ng4, etc. And the final one is attribute directive, like ng class, ng style, etc. Question number 19. What is ngIf? ngIf is a structural directive that adds or removes elements based on a condition. 20. What is ng4? ng4 is used to loop through the list and display multiple elements. That's all the basic Angular questions. Next, let's deal with the Angular architecture. What is dependency injection? DI or dependency injection allows Angular to automatically inject required services into components, reducing manual object creation. Question number 22. What is a service in Angular? A service is a class used for reusable logic like API calls, authentication, logs, etc. 23. What is @InjectableOf? @InjectableOf is a decorator that marks a class as available for dependency injection. Question number 24. What is a provider? Provider tells Angular how to create a service instance. 25. What is a lifecycle hook? Methods Angular call at different stages of a component's life are called lifecycle hooks. Common lifecycle hooks are ng-onInt, which is on component load, ng-on changes when input value changes, ng-on destroy before component is destroyed, ng after view init after the view loads, and there are few more lifecycle hooks, but these four are the commonly used ones. What is ng-on init? As discussed, ng-on init is a lifecycle hook and it is used for initializing tasks like API calls. What is a pipe? A pipe transforms data in a template. Example, date value. That uses the pipe operator date. What is a custom pipe? A user-defined pipe for custom transformations. What is an observable? Very important question. A stream of asynchronous data provided by RxJS. It can be used for API calls, events, timers, etc. That's all regarding the architecture level questions. Now let's move on to the routing level questions. What is routing? Routing enables navigation from different screens in a single page application. Which module supports routing? Angular has its built-in module called @Angular/router module from @Angular/router. What is router outlet? A placeholder where routed components are displayed. It is called the router outlet. What is router link? A directive used to navigate between pages. That is router link. How to define routes? In app.routing.module.ts, using a routes array, we can define routes. What is lazy loading? Lazy loading means loading modules only when needed. This is a performance improvement. What are route guards? Services that protects routes based on condition like authentication, etc. We add some logic to the guards. What are the various types of route guards? Can activate, can deactivate, resolve, can load, can activate child. 39. What is a wildcard route? The wildcard route handles unknown paths. Usually it redirects to a 404 page. Question number 40. What is a query parameter? Values passed via URL like slash products question mark category equal to shoes. Those are query parameters. By that, we come to the end of the routing level questions. Now let's move on to forms. Types of forms in Angular. There are two types. Template driven, it is a normal simple form. Reactive forms, it is more structured and dynamic. 42. Which module is required for forms? The forms module for template driven and reactive forms module for reactive forms. What is form control? Form control represents a single input field in a form. 44. What is form group? A collection of form controls is a form group. What is form builder? A service that simplifies creation of form group and form controls. What are validators? Built-in functions to check input validity. What is a custom validator? User-defined validation logic. What are the differences between template and reactive forms? Template driven is easy to use, whereas reactive is little complicated but more control we will have on the controls. Second difference, template driven is less scalable. Reactive form is very scalable. Template drivens are mostly HTML. Reactive forms are mostly controlled in the TS. What is value changes? Observable that emits whenever a form value changes. That is value changes. What is status changes? Emits validation status changes like valid or invalid. By this, we come to end of the forms level questions. Let's move on to HTTP and APIs. Which module is used for HTTP calls? HTTP client module. What is HTTP client? Service used for making HTTP calls like get, post, etc. What is an interceptor? A middleware that modifies HTTP request or response. Common HTTP methods: get, post, put, delete, patch. What is subscribe off? Subscribe off subscribes to an observable to receive data. What is async pipe? Auto subscribes to an observable in HTML. What is JSON? A lightweight data exchange format. What is CORS? CORS. A browser security feature that restricts API access from other domains. What is HTTP patterns? Used to add query parameter. HTTP params are used to add query parameters to a request. 60. What is HTTP headers? Used for adding headers like authorization. With this, we come to the end of the HTTP and API call related question. Now let's move on to the Angular CLI. What is Angular CLI? Command line interface for generating and managing Angular projects. 62. Command to create a project, ng new project name. Command to serve project, ng serve. Command to generate component, ng generate component name. Command to build project, ng build. What is prod flag? Builds the app in production mode. What does ng-lint do? It checks code quality and formatting issues. What does ng-test do? It runs the unit test. What does ng-deploy do? It deploys Angular app to format to supported platforms. What does ng-update do? It updates Angular dependencies and project versions. Next is the styling and UI section. What is view encapsulation? It controls how CSS affects the component. What are the types of view encapsulation? Emulated, which is default, none, and shadow DOM. What is Angular Material? A UI component library by Google for Angular. What is Bootstrap? A CSS framework often used with Angular. What is SCSS? A CSS preprocessor that supports variables, nesting, and mixins. What is host binding? Binds a class property to a host element property. What is host listener? Listens to events on the host element. What is ng class? Dynamically adds or removes classes, CSS classes. What is ng style? Dynamically applies inline style. What is change detection? Angular's mechanism to detect changes, data changes, and updates the UI. That's all regarding the CSS or style level questions. With this, let's move on to the next topic, RxJS basics. What is RxJS? It is a library for reactive programming using observable. What is a subject? Both observable and observer used for multicasting. What is behavior subject? A subject that always emits the latest value. What is map of? A method that transforms observed values. What is filter of? Filters emitted values based on condition. What is switch map of? Cancels previous observable and subscribes to a new one. What is merge map of? Runs multiple observables in parallel. What is for join off? Runs multiple observables and returns result once all of them are completed. What is debounce time off? Delays value commonly used for search inputs. What is take off? Takes a limited number of emissions, then completes. Next, let's move on to the application concepts. What is AOT? Ahead of time compilation. Compiles Angular code during build time, improving performance. What is JIT or just-in-time compilation? Compiles code in browser at runtime. What is IV? Angular's modern rendering engine with better performance and bundle size. What is zone.js? A library Angular uses to track asynchronous operation for change detection. What is polyfills.ts? It is a file that provides browser capability for older browsers. What is environment.ts? It holds the environment specific configuration like API URLs. What is index.html? The main HTML file of the Angular application. What is main.ts? The entry point that bootstraps the Angular application. What is package.json? It contains all the project dependencies and scripts. What is angular.json? A configuration file that controls Angular project settings like build, serve, assets, etc. By this, we come to the end of the Angular interview questions. I wish all my viewers all the best for your coming endeavors. Thank you, and I'm signing off. Rainbow Life. Please don't forget to subscribe to my video. Do like and share. Thank you.